kind of interesting. The Unification War. At about the time the Solarians and Asari were forming the Council, the Turians were embroiled in a bitter civil war. The Unification War, as it was later named, began with hostilities between the colonies furthest from the Turian homeworld, Palaven. These colonies were run by local chieftains, many of whom had distanced themselves from the hierarchy. Without the galvanizing influence of the government, the colonies became increasingly isolated and xenophobic. Colonists began wearing emblems or facial markings to differentiate themselves from members of other colonies, and open hostilities became common. Oh, so that's what the face paint is on a lot of Turians we've seen. When war finally broke out, the hierarchy maintained strict diplomacy and refused to get involved. After several years of fighting, less than a dozen factions remained, and the hierarchy finally intervened. By that time, the chieftains were too weak to resist. They were forced to put an end to the fighting and renew their allegiance to the hierarchy. Well, it's a pretty smart political move on their part. Though peace was restored, it took several decades for animosity between colonists to fade completely. To this day, most Turians still wear the facial markings of their home colonies. As a point of interest, the Turian term bare-faced refers to one who is beguiling or not to be trusted. It is also a slang term for politicians. That's great. Oh, God. So extinct is not shared. We'll go to that next. But I don't want to read more, Mommy. It's just one. Despite all the evidence confirming the existence of the Protheans, little is known about their culture and society. From time to time, dig sites will yield new clues, but after 50,000 years of decay, little of value is unearthed. Recent research is focused on the discovery of Prothean data disks. On their own, they are frail and rarely found in one piece. Occasionally, however, an intact disk will be discovered within a console or reading device. To date, over 3 dozen disks have been recovered, and a few of those have been restored to the point where researchers can begin analyzing them. I wonder if the small data cache that we found was a collection of disks back on Mars. Though it may be some time before scientists discover a way to transfer the data off the disks, they are currently considered the most tangible leads for learning more about the Prothean culture. Interesting. Okay, so non-council is shared, so we'll do that one, and then we'll do Citadel and Galactic Government, because that's shared. Humanity System Alliance is not shared. Okay, so we'll start with primary on non-council races. It's probably a lot because I just talked to Rex and Garrus and Tally's ear off about all the different things for these things. So it's probably like Krogan stuff, to be honest, if I had to guess.
In the early 2160s, the Alliance began aggressive colonization of worlds in the Skyllian Verge, much to the dismay of the Batarians, who had been developing the region for several decades. In 2171, the Batarians petitioned the Council to declare the Verge a zone of Batarian interest. The Council refused, however, declaring unsettled worlds in the region open to human colonization. In protest, the Batarians closed their Citadel embassy and severed official diplomatic relations with the Council, effectively becoming a rogue state. They instigated a proxy war in the Verge by funneling money and weapons to criminal organizations, urging them to strike at human colonies. Hostilities peaked with the Skyllian Blitz of 2176, an attack on the human capital of Elysium by Batarian-funded pirates and slavers. In 2178, the Alliance retaliated with a crushing assault on the moon of Torfin, long used as a staging base by Batarian-backed criminals. In the aftermath, the Batarians retreated into their own systems and are now rarely seen in Citadel space.
Well, good. They seem like pretty big dicks to me. But yeah, that was quite rash of them to just kind of secede from everything and then go from there. I kind of talked about this last time, but it's, well, in the last session, but this is where you actually find out about that. At least I don't think we saw this one before. If we have, I forgot, and I'll just cut it out at this point. Anyway, moving on to the Elcor.
The Elcor are a Citadel species native to the high-gravity world Dakuna. They are massive creatures, standing on 4 muscular legs for increased stability. Elcor move slowly, an evolved response to an environment where a fall can be lethal. This has colored their psychology, making them deliberate and conservative. Elcor's speech is ponderous and monotone. Among themselves, scent, slight movements, and sub-vocalized infrasound convey shades of meaning that make a human smile seem as subtle as a fireworks display. Since their subtlety can lead to misunderstandings with other species, the Elcor often go out of their way to clarify when they are being sarcastic, amused, or angry.
Did my Codex
The
VI just
Kuna's
breathe?
high gravity impedes mountain formation. Most of the world consists of flat, open plains, which prehistoric Elcor wandered across in small family bands. Modern Elcor still prefer open sky and can become restless and uncomfortable on long starship journeys.
Usually they do a better job to cover up the narrator there breathing, but if that's a Codex VI reading this stuff, it doesn't make any sense. Oh, whatever. But yes, that tells you, like they said, the Elcor are these giant sluggish creatures for reasons, because they grew up in a high gravity environment, and it made them very, deliberate. So it made them very conservative. It made them slow in motion and speech, but it doesn't necessarily make them slower in thought. They just try to make sure that what they're saying is what they want to say, Anyway.
The Hanar are a citadel species known for excessive politeness. They speak with scrupulous precision and take offense at improper language. Hanar that expect to deal with other species take special courses to help them unlearn their tendency to take offense at improper speech. All Hanar have two names. The face name is known to the world. The soul name is kept for use among close friends and relations. Hanar never refer to themselves in the first person in conversation with someone they know on a face name basis. To do so is considered egotistical, so instead they refer to themselves as this one, or the impersonal it. Their homeworld, Kajay, has 90% ocean cover and orbits an energetic white star, resulting in a permanent blanket of cloud. Due to the presence of Prothean ruins on the world, many Hanar worship them, and Hanar myths often speak of an elder race that civilized them by teaching them language.
I would say normally that would be kind of hogwash, but after seeing the Prothean ruin that was on Elitania, there might be something to that, considering they grew up on a world that deliberately had Prothean ruins placed in it, So, it's interesting.
When the Asari discovered the Citadel, they also discovered the Keepers, a docile, multi-limbed insect race that seemingly exists only to maintain and repair the Great Prothean Station. Early attempts to communicate with or study the Keepers were failures, and it is now illegal to interfere with or impede Keeper activity. Because they are completely non-threatening, Keepers have become virtually invisible to everyone else. Similarly, they seem indifferent to other species, except for their tendency to help new arrivals integrate themselves into the Citadel. No matter how many Keepers die due to old age, violence, or accident, they maintain a constant number. No one has discovered the source of new Keepers, but some hypothesize they are genetic constructs, biological androids created somewhere deep in the inaccessible core of the Citadel itself.
Well, that might explain why they have such knowledge of the Citadel, but that's kind of strange, huh? Well, hopefully Shorban and Jalid can publish their papers on what exactly they are using the readings that we got. I probably shouldn't have kept doing that side quest because it was kind of illegal and pointless, but at least now we'll have some knowledge of them once they analyze all the data that we got. So, Krogan.
The Krogan evolved in a hostile and vicious environment. Until the invention of gunpowder weapons, eaten by predators was still the #1 cause of Krogan fatalities. Afterwards, it was death by gunshot. When the Solarians discovered them, the Krogan were a brutal, primitive species, struggling to survive a self-inflicted nuclear winter. The Solarians culturally uplifted them, teaching them to use and build modern technology, so they could serve as soldiers in the Rachni War. Liberated from the harsh conditions of their homeworld, the quick-breeding Krogan experienced an unprecedented population explosion. They began to colonize nearby worlds, even though these worlds were already inhabited. The Krogan rebellions lasted nearly a century, only ending when the Turians unleashed the Genophage, a Solarian-developed bioweapon that crushed all Krogan resistance. The Genophage makes only 1 in 1,000 pregnancies viable, and today the Krogan are a slowly dying breed. Understandably, the Krogan harbor a grudge against all other species, especially the Turians.
And I mean, who wouldn't, with that kind of stuff, but that's rough. It's a tough situation.
Driven from their home system by the Geth nearly 3 centuries ago, Most Quarians now live aboard the migrant fleet, a flotilla of 50,000 vessels ranging in size from passenger shuttles to mobile space stations. Home to 17 million Quarians, the flotilla understandably has scarce resources. Because of this, each Quarian must go on a rite of passage known as the pilgrimage when they come of age. They leave the fleet and only return once they have found something of value they can bring back to their people. Other species tend to look down on the Quarians for creating the Geth and for the negative impact their fleet has when it enters a system. This has led to many myths and rumors about the Quarians, including the belief that underneath their clothes and breathing masks, they are actually cybernetic creatures, a combination of organic and synthetic parts.
Well, that just seems silly now. Like, come on. I'm sure if you were actually on the flotilla with any Quarians, like if you were doing research on them, you would see that they're probably not that. Like, it doesn't seem like Tali is a synthetic construct of some kind. I hope not, anyway. She seems pretty human to me. If they're somewhat synthetic, then that means that they've come a lot farther than we thought, and we have to be more careful. But anyway, on to the Volus.
The Volus are a member species of the Citadel with their own embassy, but they are also a client race of the Turians. Centuries ago, they were voluntarily absorbed into the hierarchy, effectively trading their mercantile prowess for Turian military protection. Erun, their homeworld, lies far beyond the normal life zone of its star. However, the world has a high-pressure greenhouse atmosphere that traps enough heat to support an ammonia-based biochemistry. As a result, the Volus must wear pressure suits and breathers when dealing with other species, as conventional nitrogen-oxygen air mixtures are poisonous to them, and in the low-pressure atmospheres tolerable to most species, their flesh will actually split open. Volus culture is tribal, bartering lands and even people to gain status. This culture of exchange inclines them to economic pursuits. It was the Volus who authored the Unified Banking Act, and they continue to monitor and balance the Citadel economy.
Let's go back to this part here. So they're ammonia-based. They're not actually based on, carbon, and, they don't breathe in oxygen the way that we do. But they were brought up in an ammonia-based environment where there's high gravity and greenhouse atmosphere. So that's why they wear their suits, because of what they are, pretty much. So that's interesting. They're one of the few council races that actually had, non-council races in this case. Basically, one of the few races that we actually meet in the game that has a biochemistry that's different than ours. So it's interesting. Okay, my turn again. How many do we have here? Oh, a shit ton. Okay. Take a big drink of water before I start. The Krogan Genophage. The Genophage bioweapon was created to end the Krogan rebellions. From the start, the Krogan had overwhelmed the Council. Only timely first contact with the Turians saved the Council races. The Turians fought the Krogan to a standstill, but sheer weight of Krogan numbers indicated the war could not be won through conventional means. The Turians collaborated with the Solarians to genetically engineer a counter to the rapid breeding of the Krogan, which would cut down on their numbers, obviously. The Genophage virus gained the energy to replicate by eating key genetic sequences. Every cell in every Krogan had to be altered for the weapon to be foolproof. Otherwise, the Krogan could not have used gene therapy to fix the affected tissues. Because as you can... I don't know if they tell us later, if they give us Krogan biochemistry, but Krogan have secondary and then even tertiary organs for a lot of their major organs. I think they have like 4 hearts or something crazy like that. So they can repair themselves pretty easily. So they had to alter every cell, so that way they wouldn't repair the sexual reproduction stuff that makes everything die, Once a genophage strain could find no more genes to eat, it would starve and die, limiting spin-off mutation and contamination. This, quote, created genetic flaw is hereditary. The Solarians believed the genophage would be used as a deterrent, a position the Turians viewed as naive. Once the project was complete, the Turians mass-produced and deployed it. The Krogan homeworld, their colonies, and all occupied worlds were infected. The resulting mutation made only 1 in 1,000 Krogan pregnancies carry to term. It did not reduce fertility, but offspring viability. The rare females able to carry children to term became prizes the Krogan warlords fought brutal battles over. And basically, if they're fighting each other, they're not fighting the Turians or the Solarians or the Asari. The Krogan are a shadow of their former glory. While the rebellions took place centuries ago, they are constantly reminded of the horror of the genophage and their inability to counter it. The release of the genophage is still controversial, bitterly debated in many circles. And understandably so. It was a bioweapon that basically crippled their race forever. So, who wouldn't debate about that? The Krogan rebellions. After the Rachni War, the quick-breeding Krogan expanded at the expense of their neighbors. Warlords leveraged their veteran soldiers to seize living space, while the council races were still grateful. Over centuries, the Krogan conquered world after world. There was always just one more needed. When the council finally demanded a withdrawal from the Asari colony of Lucia, Krogan overlord Kradak stormed off the citadel, daring the council to take their worlds back. But the council had taken precautions. The finest STG operators and Asari huntresses had been drafted into a covert, quote, observation force, the Office of Special Tactics and Reconnaissance, or the Spectres. The Spectres opened the war with crippling strategic strikes. Krogan planets went dark as computer viruses flooded the extranet. Sabotaged antimatter refineries disappeared in blue-white annihilation, which probably killed a lot of civilians. Not good. Headquarters stations shattered into orbit-clogging debris, rammed by pre-placed suicide freighters. Still, this only delayed the inevitable. The war would have been lost if not for first contact with the Turians, who responded to Krogan threats with a prompt declaration of war. Being on the far side of Krogan space from the Council, the Turians advanced rapidly into the lightly defended Krogan rear areas. The Krogan responded by dropping space stations and asteroids on Turian colonies. Holy shit. 3 worlds were rendered completely uninhabitable. How do you even do that? How do you even fight against something like that? Especially conventionally. Now I understand where the Turians were coming from. When they can redirect asteroids, which normally have a set rotation around wherever they're traveling to and from, like around a sun or something like that, like Halley's Comet has a set trajectory. When you can redirect one of those and shoot it at a planet and kill billions of people by doing so, how do you don't fight those people conventionally? This was precisely the wrong approach to take with the Turians. Each is first and foremost a public servant, willing to risk his life to protect his comrades. Rather than increasing public war weariness, Krogan tactics stiffened Turian resolve. So that was a mistake on the Krogan's part, even though, they're shooting asteroids at people. Come on. The arrival of Turian task forces saved many worlds from the warlords' marauding fleets, but it took development of the genophage bioweapon to end the war. There were decades of unrest afterwards. Rogue warlords and holdout groups of insurgents refused to surrender or disappeared into the frontier systems to become pirates. So the Krogan are in a bad position, but when you're dropping asteroids on billions of people, you can't really say it was not your fault. It's bad that they're being, punished for it for eternity, but still, that was quite a bad thing that they did. Let's keep going. Quarian economy. The migrant fleet has little economic base, operating in a state of perpetual hand-to-mouth. While Quarian ships include light manufacturing and assembly plants, they lack heavy industries such as refining and shipbuilding, because they can't out in the middle of deep space, The fleet has tankers for water purification and oxygen cracking, but the space-intensive nature of agriculture limits food production. A single disaster could destroy the fragile balance. The Turians. The Quarians earn income in creative ways. Because the government is obliged to provide food, water, air, and medical support for every individual, the Conclave strategically determines the course of the fleet to bring in resources and income. A species who suspects the migrant fleet is heading towards their space often offers a gift of surplus starships, fuel, and resources to convince the Conclave to alter course, so that way they can economically trade, import, and export and stuff. You give me something, I give you something, As the fleet passes through a system, swarms of mining vessels work over asteroids for metals and siliceous materials. I know it's silicon-based, but I've never seen that word used for that before. And cometary bodies for water, ice, and organics. Quarian miners are adept at locating and strip mining spaceborne resources. This sparks conflict with corporations already working in the system, obviously, because they have claimed the resources as their own. Large mining concerns spend millions on lobbyists and public relations portraying the Quarians as locusts, devouring the resources of a system before moving on. That's kind of asshole-ish, but, I guess if they're taking your livelihood, so be it. The greatest asset of the Quarians is their rarefied skills. Most are experienced miners. Due to their life of perpetual salvage and repair, they are skilled engineers and technicians. More than once, the very corporations that lobby against the Quarians have made backroom deals with the fleet, arranging for skilled Quarians to fill space engineering jobs that other species would demand higher wages for. Wow. Quarians are widely hated among the working classes. The Quarians are coming to take our jobs, quote, is a common response to the fleet's approach. They're pretty well hated, aren't they? The government. Due to the Quarians' precarious existence and the need to enforce strict rationing, the government is somewhat autocratic. The migrant fleet's operations are directed by the Admiralty, a board of 5 military officers who are advised by a legislative body called the Conclave. Each vessel in the fleet has the right to send representatives to the Conclave aboard the flagship. The number of representatives is based on crew size. Larger clans with bigger ships and more votes form the cores of political blocs. Opposition comes from the Outriders Coalition, with delegates from thousands of smaller ships. So the Outriders is kind of like the coalition, like it says, of all of these smaller ships' bodies. So they probably work in about... They probably end up about even in terms of who gets the most votes. Excuse me. The Admiralty defers to the Conclave's decisions in most circumstances. However, if all 5 members agree the Conclave decision jeopardizes the survival of the fleet and cannot get the Conclave to address their concerns, they have the right to summarily overturn the legislative decision. After the Admiralty uses this extraordinary power, they must resign. If the Admiralty does not step down after using their veto, the rest of the military is obliged to arrest them. Each ship captain has authority over his vessel, but is advised by an elected civilian council, just as the Admiralty is advised by the Conclave. This relationship may range from cooperation and polite tolerance to outright hostility, but any captain who overrules his council without good reason is relieved of command by the Admiralty. Well, checks and balances, man. A little more complex than what we have, but still. Many Quarian ships are owned by clans who pool their resources to purchase used vessels from private sellers. Large ships are prestigious for big, rich clans, but a small ship means status for a small clan with enough personal wealth to afford a private vessel. Clan vessel captains are not subject to dismissal by the Admiralty. Abusive captains are a, quote, family problem if they do not disrupt the operations of the fleet. So yeah, checks and balances, although it seems like their local government is a little bit lacking, but it's a ship-to-ship basis, you know. They probably all know each other on those ships based on how populated they are from what Tally has told us previously. The migrant fleet is the largest concentration of starfaring vessels in the galaxy, sprawling across millions of kilometers. It can take days for the entire fleet to pass through a mass relay. That's a lot of ships. When the Quarians fled their homeworld, the fleet was a motley aggregation of freighters, shuttles, industrial vessels, and the odd warship. After 3 centuries, all have been modified to support larger crews as comfortably as possible. As the Quarians achieved stability, they began weeding out the ships least suitable for long-term habitation, selling them and pooling the money to buy larger and more space-worthy hulls. This process is ongoing as vessels wear out and break down. While some ships enjoy dedicated cabins with full privacy and sanitary facilities, many more are former freighters whose cargo bays and containers are pressurized and divided into family spaces using simple metal cubicle bulkheads. The Quarians enliven these austere spaces with colorful quilts and tapestries, which also help muffle sound. Although, according to Tally, they wouldn't want to muffle sound because that means that something is going wrong. Maybe it just muffles it doesn't, silence it. The day-to-day operations of the fleet, traffic control, station keeping, supply distribution, and so on, are under military jurisdiction. Though ship captains have the authority to deviate from their assigned positions and may leave the fleet at any time, they are assumed to do so at their own risk. As the migrant fleet moves around the galaxy, many ships split off to pursue individual goals, returning days or even years later. Wow, that's a lot of dedication. How would they find each other years later? I mean, I guess they're all set up to a collective network of, LADAR, but, that would be difficult to find them, afterwards. You'd have to jump through a lot of mass relays to try to get back to them. Maybe it's just through, comm buoys. I don't know. When Quarians of the migrant fleet reach young adulthood, they must leave their birth ship and find a new crew to accept them as permanent residents. That's within their own Quarian society, a new crew, so they go to a new Quarian ship. To prove themselves to these new ship captains, they must recover something of value. This is offered to their prospective captain as proof that they will not be a mere burden on the shoestring resources of the ship. This process is called a pilgrimage. Stripped of ritual, the pilgrimage is merely an attempt to maintain genetic diversity within the small, relatively isolated population bases that make up the migrant fleet. If the young stayed and married within their birth vessel, the risk of inbreeding would increase sharply, which is not good for their survival at all. Quarians are surgically fitted with their various immunity-boosting implants in preparation for leaving on pilgrimage. Having grown up within the sterile, controlled environments of the migrant fleet ships, Quarians have virtually no natural immune system. And it seems weird that they would know that and put that in the secondary codex, but then a lot of people would say, oh, they're cybernetic constructs of some kind. Like, they grew up in these controlled environments and they don't have an immune system. If they take their mask off, they basically die. Like, how could you know that and then be like, oh yeah, they're synthetically based somehow? It just seems like a dumb position to be in. Okay, Citadel and Galactic Government. Let's do planets and locations and then Humanity and Systems Alliance, and then we'll move on to doing this stuff one at a time. So we'll start here.
Pharos is a habitable
Pharos
world.
already. This is the new
There
one.
are between 2 and 400 billion stars in the galaxy, and less than 1% of them have ever been visited or had their systems properly surveyed. Humanity's early expansion into the Attican Traverse was haphazard, a desperate race to claim habitable planets where populations can be economically settled. Ignored in the wake of this land grab were thousands of less hospitable worlds, each potentially rich with industrial resources. The wealth of entire solar systems lies untapped, waiting for corporate survey teams or independent pioneers to discover and exploit them. However, this is not an easy task. In addition to the environmental hazards, the fact that uncharted worlds are largely ignored makes them popular bases for criminals, revolutionaries, cults, and others who wish to remain unnoticed by galactic society.
Which is why we have to be so careful when we're heading to these planets that are in between us and the main missions of the game, because they could have all of those things in there, and none of them really want to settle things diplomatically. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on these uncharted worlds in the first place. So, gotta be careful. Humanity and the Systems Alliance. My turn again. We read that one already. Geological Survey. As the human race expands its territory and Oh, okay. I read that wrong. As the human race expands its territory and raises the general standard of living, demand for industrial resources continues to grow. Many planets, moons, and asteroids contain a wealth of resources, but many systems have barely been charted, let alone thoroughly surveyed, as the primary one just said. Unmanned probes are one solution, but they are often lost to space hazards, unforeseen circumstances, or theft by salvagers. In recent years, Aegis, the Alliance Geological Service, has offered bounties to private individuals or teams willing to perform mineralogical surveys on the frontier. That would be what we're doing when we survey the planets. This survey data is made publicly available to further corporate development. Due to the cost of travel and the dangers of operating on hostile worlds, it is rarely a profitable endeavor, but in this case it is, because we're already heading through these mass relays anyway, so why not explore around, you know? The different things that they're looking for. Light metals. Metals with low atomic weight are often used in the construction of spacecraft and vehicles. Heavy metals. Metals with higher atomic weights are used to construct equipment components. The platinum group elements are particularly useful. And we've already found some platinum, so that's pretty good. Rare earths. Most useful materials in this category are radioactives or magnets, and I'm sure you can figure out what they're used for. Stuff like polonium rounds, radioactive rounds, that sort of stuff. And then gases. Various gases are required to support all known forms of sapient life. Some, such as helium-3, are commonly used as fuel. So that's what we're all looking for. And I think that's it for that one. Back to Citadel and Galactic Government, then.
The Citadel is an ancient deep space. The Council is an executive committee composed of representatives from the Asari Republics, the Turian Hierarchy, and the Solarian Union. Though they have no official power over the independent governments of other species, the Council's decisions carry great weight throughout the galaxy. No single Council race is strong enough to defy the other two, and all have a vested interest in compromise and cooperation. Each of the Council species has general characteristics associated with the various aspects of governing the galaxy. The Asari are typically seen as diplomats and mediators. The Solarians gather intelligence and information. The Turians provide the bulk of the military and peacekeeping forces. Any species granted an embassy on the Citadel is considered an associate member, bound by the accords of the Citadel Conventions. Associate members may bring issues to the attention of the Council, though they have no input on the decision. The Human Systems Alliance became an associate member of the Citadel in 2165.
And as far as I know, we're the last species thus far to become an associate member. I don't think anybody else does in this game. I think maybe in one of the other two they do, but not sure about that. Citadel space.
Citadel space is an unofficial term referring to any region of space controlled by a species that acknowledges the authority of the Citadel Council. At first glance, it appears this territory encompasses most of the galaxy. In reality, however, less than 1% of the stars have been explored. Even Mass Effect FTL drive is slow relative to the volume of the galaxy. Empty space and systems without suitable drive discharge sites are barriers to exploration. Only the mass relays allow ships to jump hundreds of light years in an instant, the key to expanding across an otherwise impassable galaxy. Whenever a new relay is activated, the destination system is rapidly developed. From that hub, FTL drive is used to expand to nearby star clusters. The result is a number of densely developed clusters, thinly spread across the vast expanse of space, connected by the mass relay network.
Which makes sense, considering, if we didn't have a mass relay to travel to a star system, like if there wasn't one anywhere nearby, why would you ever go there, So, they allow you to go to more mass relays as we go in the game here, but not into the terminus systems, because that's not Citadel space. So, the Attican Traverse is considered Citadel space, and then there's the actual Citadel space, which is around the Widow Nebula, which is where the Citadel itself is. Basically, the galaxy is split into 5 different sections, and those, or maybe it's 6, but those sections aren't really elaborated on until Mass Effect 3 anyway, so I'm not really worried about that for right now. Just know that Citadel space is like a lot of the galaxy, and it's basically everything except the terminus systems and the Perseus Veil, which I think is even just a part of the terminus systems anyway. There's also uncharted space, but like I said, how do you get to uncharted space when there's no mass relay there? So, what we have here, Citadel Conventions. Yeah, we need to read this one. These diplomatic talks occurred in the wake of the Krogan rebellions as a response to the destruction of the conflict and an attempt to distance the Council from the brutal Krogan warfare. The conventions regulate the use of weapons of mass destruction. A WMD causes environmental alteration to a world. A bomb that produces a large crater is not considered a WMD. A bomb that causes a nuclear winter is. Use of WMD is forbidden on, quote, garden worlds like Earth, with ecospheres that can readily support a population. If a habitable world is destroyed, it will not be replaced for millions of years. The conventions do not forbid the use of WMD on hostile worlds or in sealed space station environments. Many militaries continue to develop and maintain stockpiles. The conventions have graded weapons of mass destruction into tiers of concern. Tier 1 is the greatest threat to galactic peace, and Tier 1 consists of large kinetic impactors such as asteroid drops or deorbiting space stations, which we've talked about is ridiculous on levels I can't even imagine right now. Effectively free and available in any system in the form of debris left over from planetary accretion, kinetic impactors are the weapon of choice for terrorists and third galaxy nations, quote-unquote, like terminus system, pirate gangs, and that sort of stuff. Tier 2. Uncontrolled self-replicating weapons such as nanotechnology, viral or bacteriological organisms, von Neumann devices, and I don't remember who von Neumann is, I'll look it up afterwards, and destructive computer viruses. These weapons can lie dormant for millennia, waiting for a careless visitor to carry them onto another world. The reason why they say bacteriological there is important for later, I think. I'm not really sure what they're talking about. I think they're referring to the Rachni in Tier 2 there as well. Oh, no, they refer to it in Tier 4. Here, hang on. Let's say in a second. Large energy burst weapons such as nuclear antimatter warheads are Tier 3. In Tier 4 is alien species deliberately introduced to crowd out native forms necessary for the health of an ecosystem. Well, that's not really what I was talking about, but ecological tampering can take years to bear fruit, making it difficult to prove. But yeah, I imagine they would rank the Rachni somewhere close to these asteroid drops, probably in Tier 2. Uncontrolled self-replicating weapons. So basically, if they're uncontrolled, they're self-replicating, and they are fighting us, that's bad. So, Citadel Security Services, or CSEC. Citadel Security is a volunteer police service answering to the Citadel Council. The 200,000 constables of CSEC are responsible for maintaining public order in the densely populated Citadel. They also provide pirates suppression, customs enforcement, and search and rescue throughout the Citadel cluster. CSEC has 6 divisions: enforcement, or uniformed officers who patrol the Citadel to respond to emergencies; investigation, detectives who puzzle out the truth behind crimes and bring perpetrators to justice, probably what Chelik was; customs screens the thousands of passengers and cargo containers that pass through the Citadel's ports every day. We spoke to one when we were first getting to the Citadel, I think. Networking deals with cyber crimes like identity and copyright theft, hacking, and viral attacks, and illegal artificial intelligence. Special response deals with hostage situations, bombs, and heavily armed criminals. In the unlikely event that attackers board the Citadel, they are also the front line of defense, armed with military-grade equipment. And last but not least, patrol, the naval arm with ships stationed throughout the Citadel cluster. Unlike the other divisions, they are rarely seen at the Citadel, nor do they stay in one place for very long, because they have to, patrol the Widow Nebula. Joining CSEC is prestigious. Applications must be sponsored by a Citadel counselor or the ambassador of an associate council race. So Garrus got sponsorship from the Turian counselor. Wow, that must have been an honor. Generally, applicants have many years of distinguished service in the military or police forces of their nation, but an inexperienced applicant with demonstrable talent will be fairly considered. CSEC and the Spectres are often at odds. Many CSEC members, notably current executor Venari Palin, believe that allowing Spectres to be, quote, above the law is a dangerous practice. The actions of Saren Arterius has led credence to this position. The Spectres, in turn, are aggravated when CSEC's dedication to procedure and due process hampers their investigations. I'd like to think Shepard is somewhere in the middle, but considering Garrus was a member of CSEC, when this is all over, if he goes back there, she doesn't really want him to be all, I can do whatever I want, because he wouldn't last very long in CSEC with that kind of an attitude, so gotta keep him in line, The Presidium Ring. The ring is an enclosed loop of park-like space. As we saw, there were lakes and plants and everything everywhere, serving as the connection point for the wards. The interior walls are lined with the embassies of influential species and private residences for the galaxy's elite. Probably very elite, considering the fact that it's the Citadel. You probably have to pay a lot to live in the Presidium there. Can't imagine how expensive that would be. The Presidium is full of, quote, open-air restaurants, bars, and luxurious meeting areas. Gravity is about 1/3 Earth normal, which means we can kind of moon jump there. That's cool. A holographic, quote, sky is projected over the ceiling of the ring. Unlike the 24/7 bustle of the wards, the Presidium maintains a 20-hour day schedule with a 6-hour, quote, night where lights are dimmed and the sky goes through a night cycle. They don't explain this until I think an random Asari explains it at some point. We talk to him. The Citadel abides by a 26-hour cycle of day and night, which just explodes your brain when you're a human who's used to the 24-hour cycle of Earth, and you go there and they're like, yeah, there's 2 extra hours in our day. You're like, think of all the things I can do now. But anyway, this guy goes through a night cycle for 6 hours there. Offices and residences are often open to the interior. It is not unusual for embassies to have no exterior wall at all. This does not cause a crime problem due to the heavy CSEC presence and ubiquitous monitoring devices on the Presidium. Thieves are quickly identified and apprehended. Good. The ring is the location of Citadel's spaceports. Being closer to the center of spin, there's less motion for a ship to match, and the reduced spin gravity makes handling cargo easier. Hundreds of ships pass through the Citadel every day, and every species with an embassy is granted a private dock. Even humanity, as we've seen before. The tower at the center of the ring, you can see it in the picture there, it's the little circly thing that sticks out, holds the administration of the Citadel Council. The tower rises over 1 kilometer from the ring, appearing to thrust forward parallel to the ward arms. As the tower is at the center of the spin axis, it experiences little centrifugal force. Gravity is maintained using mass effect fields at a 90-degree angle to the ring and wards. So basically they make sure that, like, you see how the tower kind of bumps out and the ring, the ring's a circle, but where it's bumping out from, it's perpendicular to where it's bumping out from on the Presidium ring. They make sure that gravity is turned 90 degrees from where the Citadel is, so that way, even though it's sideways, all gravity you experience on the Citadel Tower is the same as you would experience if you were at the foot of the Citadel Tower. So basically, you're always standing on the ground rather than on the walls or the ceiling, A consular deck can be found at the base of the tower. While normally used for diplomatic couriers and specter business, the shuttles docked here can evacuate the council government in an emergency. But I'm sure that's never going to happen. Why would they even tell us that, you know?